But there's a lot of realities here that I don't see enough people talk about. It's not Activision. I mean, it probably is Activision. Like, if you look at Activision's workplace environment, I'm sure there's some cases of this. It's a game studio after all, but it's not like as a result of Activision. Blaming it on Activision, blaming it on whatever the fuck, is completely not engaging with the reality of the situation. Okay, so a lot of videos this week, especially a lot of unscripted rants. But I figured that before my next scripted one, I want to jump in and weigh in on something that has been kind of recent and pretty disturbing to read. But there's a lot of realities here that I don't see enough people talk about. I see a lot of people. Oh, well, actually, I'm just going to quickly outline what happened so everybody here is aware, and I'm going to link some sources in the description so you can read it more about it. I've just been brushing up on it myself, so please engage with that. Okay, so Jason Schreier, who's a wonderful games journalist, one of the best out there, if not the best out there, renowned for some of his pretty groundbreaking work, honestly. And now recently, he talked about the California Department of Fair Employment, which I am reading right here, which just filed a pretty insane lawsuit against Activision Blizzard, specifically about discrimination. And as you can guess, this is the games industry. So what does discrimination mean? Well, discrimination against women and minorities, of course, because that's, yay games industry. That's what it's known for. And in this case, there's some really really disturbing shit that has come to light, specifically about Blizzard. I think a lot of people are, well. First of all, let me just give you one example of what I'm talking about. I'll have it on the screen, and you can also see it down below in the comments section. So, essentially, talking about how the environment is incredibly pervasive, that there's a fraternity-esque nature to it. So, nothing you haven't heard of before if you've been following some of these lawsuits. It's a very, it's a boys club. And when I say a boys club, I mean, not like the no girls allowed, but more so like let's sexually harass every female employee we can possibly get our hands on kind of place. Generally just kind of excluding women, treating them poorly, sexually harassing them, making things like, rape jokes, for example, talking about, their female employees in derogatory ways or in discriminatory ways. There's this one segment in Section 48 talking about how a woman under employment by Blizzard committed suicide due to the workplace atmosphere, or at least in partially responsible to the workplace atmosphere. And then they were passing around nudes of that deceased woman at a work party. Things like that. Pretty horrific shit. But also not unexpected. And what I see, and this is really depressing, but what I see now amongst these comments, especially within the WoW community, specifically within the Blizzard community, is that they're just saying the same shit they've always been saying. This is what Activision does to a company. Oh, Bobby Kotick. Oh, Bobby. Like, all this kind of shit. When, if you read anything inside this file in this document, it's not Activision Blizzard. Activision, that's just the name, right? That's the label. These retellings, this case has been spanning for almost 2 decades, since 2007, right? 2006. You get people like you get some big names that were really high up getting indicted on some of this shit. Okay, so I really want to come and punch in here because I wanted to give you guys an example of what I'm talking about. I didn't really have to search far and wide to find this example, but here we go. Section 47, you guys can see it on screen, talking about Alex Afrisabi, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I'm not going to try again, who is the former senior creative director for World of Warcraft, who pretty much just engaged in blatant sexual harassment for his tenure at Blizzard. He had, during BlizzCon, he got drunk and talked about, wanting to marry his employees, groped them, tried to kiss them. Overall, just really inappropriate, shitty behavior. He was talked to by Alan Brack multiple times, but clearly just got a slap on his wrist. And his suite apparently was named the Cosby Suite. This was misspelled in the lawsuit. They spelled it Crosby, but I'm assuming it was Bill Cosby, the alleged rapist. They literally allude to it in the following line. That should answer all your questions. If your suite is named after a rapist, not a good look. Makes sense, right? All I want to say. It's not Activision. I mean, it probably is Activision. Like, if you look at Activision's workplace environment, I'm sure there's some cases of this. It's a game studio after all, but it's not like as a result of Activision. Blaming it on Activision, blaming it on whatever the fuck, is completely not engaging with the reality of the situation. And the reality of the situation is the only reason we're hearing about this now isn't because it just started recently. We're hearing about this now because the zeitgeist has changed enough that these kinds of stories can be told, right? Say what you want about whatever cultural movement, whether you agree with it or disagree with it. One of the most important elements to understand about the pervasive culture right now, whether it be the Me Too movement that started a few years ago, to anything else, is that people who were abused are more likely to speak up about that abuse today than they were before. Because before, what does that involve? Well, if we can look at the Weinstein situation that occurred a couple of years ago, we see that the woman who did speak up about it 2 decades ago, what happened? Were they listened to? No, of course not. They were blacklisted. They never got a job in Hollywood again. And that's why people are disincentivized to speak up about it. And that didn't just exist in Hollywood, by the way. That existed everywhere. Everywhere. And that includes, by the way, the games industry. And we are reaping those rewards, if you can even call them rewards, which you can't. You can't call these rewards. You can't call people killing themselves over sexual harassment rewards. I don't know why I just did that. But that's the reality now. We're getting 2 decades of cases coming up at once. Boom. Hitting us like a sack of shit. We need to engage with the reality that this shit has been happening for 2 decades. This has probably been happening ever since Blizzard got founded. And this has probably been happening in many other companies that aren't just Blizzard, right? That isn't just Blizzard. And we've been seeing that, right? Ubisoft, who didn't do anything about it and just kind of stayed quiet for a little bit, released a statement like, we take this seriously. And then nothing changed as a result. We've seen this in EA. We've seen this in hundreds of companies at this point within the games industry and elsewhere. So we need to be engaging with this. We need to be addressing this in a environment where we are not brushing off the severity of it by just suggesting that this is a result of whatever biases we may have against Activision or against Bobby Kotick or whatever other memes people love constantly vomiting out whenever there's criticisms of Blizzard, right? Like, oh, Blizzard was flawless back in 2006, but now it's like, oh no, things are bad. Now they want money. No, right? We need to be engaging with this as it is, and it's really, really important. And this has been just a thing that's been happening in the West for a while now, like in the West, within Western companies. And there are many reasons for this, by the way. I don't want to really go into it in depth, but generally speaking, the reason this has been a big thing in the West is because this movement has been occurring in the West, right? This kind of promotion of, or at least giving people that have potentially faced, pretty abusive environments, the opportunity to talk about them. Obviously, in this case, this is not necessarily one recounting or even 2 or a dozen. This is many, many, many. This is just a full-on case. But we've seen this within organizations within the game industry. I mean, just look at Method, right? I mean, not only were they harboring an absolute fucking psychopath, sexual deviant, pedophile, right? Someone who groomed children all the way down to, 13-year-olds. And let's be clear here. Many of them probably knew about this and didn't want to engage with it because it's optically bad for their business. Naturally, that blew back in their faces, and they, suffered as a result of that optically instead of just dropping him like a sack of shit. Moving on, they try to brush it under the rug, as we've seen in the case that occurred a year or so ago at this point. And we're going to keep seeing this. We are going to keep seeing this. So what do we do? What do we do, right? Do we just, I don't know, brush it under the rug as well? Do we just, shit happens? Do we support it tacitly on Twitter? Do we quit the game because of it? What do we do? And that's where personal responsibility comes as, into this conversation, right? I'm not going to sit here and, preach to you about how you should be quitting World of Warcraft, because chances are I'm probably not going to be quitting World of Warcraft, and I don't think a lot of people are either. They can talk about it on Twitter. They can say, oh, I'm going to quit World of Warcraft. This is the line I'm drawing against Blizzard and all this shit. But that's really not that's not the... I don't think that doesn't have the response you may want it to, because that movement is really hard to orchestrate. We saw that with the whole Hong Kong situation, all that shit that Blizzard was embroiled in a year or two ago. This is not solving what you may think it is. I think on a grand scale it might, like, oh, they're losing money. That's what's going to promote them to change the environment. But I think if we're engaging with the reality, like I'm trying to promote here, the reality isn't that they're going to change their company. This is not a company policy, just so we're clear, right? This is not a company policy. The 8 commandments at Blizzard, one of them isn't sexually harass every girl that walks through the headquarters. That's not a policy. That's not something they can change willingly. They're not like, oh, we're losing money? Okay, unharass those women. That's not what's happening, right? That can't happen. It's a infrastructure thing. And, not to be insensitive here, but this is something I've been talking about, right? Not from this angle, but just from the game design angle. There are management issues at Blizzard and management issues in many game companies. And these management issues don't just affect the gameplay. They don't just affect the systems. Titan forging, that's a manage. Yeah, but there are far greater problems, right? The simple issue is, there's lacking in content for the amount of time it took to release a piece of content, right? It's lacking in content. It's under-designed. It's buggy. That's a management problem. But in a much more real sense, what do management problems lead to? Shitty work environments, right? Work environments that facilitate shitty, toxic behavior. Because if your employees are unhappy, that unhappy manifests not only in their work, but in their attitude in that work. Number 2, because it's not just that. It's also people in power not being held accountable. Again, not a policy. That is an implicit understanding when you go to work in a place. If you have ever worked anywhere and you worked under someone, you know that generally speaking up against that person, not the best idea. You want to look good for your bosses, and looking good does not involve you bringing them severe issues with the company's infrastructure, especially socially, things that are very difficult to change, especially when it's about them. That is something you are disincentivized from doing implicitly. They're not like, you're not allowed to do this. And in many cases, they're probably like, please do this. Tell us if we're doing something wrong. Tell us if you're doing something wrong. And you do, and you're canned the next morning, right? Maybe not for doing that. They'll find another reason, but they generally don't want to keep people around that could potentially harm their optics, right? This is a pervasive social issue within the company. The solution here isn't just to rob them of their monetary returns. It's a push socially, right? Show them how to be better, right? Show them that, or at least remind them that this is, something that you won't be tolerating. Obviously, since it's a company, not a person, the best way to do that is to suggest, well, I'm not going to support you with my money. I get that. That's a good idea, right? Like if you're really gung-ho about this, you can do that. But there's also other ways to do that as well. I think this is an optics game. This is a social game. This is a game that I'm not talking about World of Warcraft. I'm talking about the social dynamics here. It's a game of looking one way. The company wants to look one way, I think Blizzard's slogan in their company is "Every voice matters" or something along those lines. Does it though? Does every voice matter? Doesn't seem like it, right? Doesn't seem like it. Seems like there's people killing themselves. So, what does that mean? Well, on Blizzard posts, how about you remind them of this? How about you ruin their optics, and that is what's going to rive people of their support, right? It's not just your own personal choice to stop supporting them. It's putting them in a position where they look so bad that they understand that's going to affect their bottom line. And that's what might breed them to be more gung-ho about these social changes. If only that means just them getting rid of some of these bad eggs, within the company, even that would be a more positive environment. But at the end of the day, we could never know. And that's the saddest reality of this. We cannot know whether these changes will occur. It will take 5, 10 years without a lawsuit to know whether they made any changes at all. Because they can, I don't know, give a fucking crazy severance package or some crazy, what is it? Stocks, right? To a upper management person within Blizzard, someone who's really up there in the ladder. Okay, please step down. You're not working for us anymore. But here's all this fucking, you're going to be set for life, essentially. Have fun. And then they go on Twitter, make a tweet longer or one of those screenshots. We addressed the problem. We addressed the issue. And you know what? Maybe they have. It's just really hard for us to know because these things don't stop overnight. We need to engage with this, right? We need to engage with this. I don't want to sit here and tell you that every one of these points of activism that Blizzard has, been at the brunt of, the Hong Kong issue, for example. Did that affect them? Quite frankly, I think them releasing a mediocre expansion after BFA affecting them much more than Hong Kong, right? Than the Hong Kong shit. That's just the reality, right? A lot of people just don't give a fuck. But if you do care, right? If you care about this situation, I think it's important to win the optics battle here. And it kind of sucks, right? Because it doesn't feel like morally righteous to just be like on Twitter fucking under their posts. You guys literally are partially responsible for a suicide and lots of other stuff. Probably, take some accountability for that. But it does do something. It makes the company look worse. And when the company looks worse, there's potential changes that can come as a result of that. But that's the most we can do, right? We're kind of powerless in this situation. The most we can do is remind them, hold them to higher standards, and in some cases quit the game, right? Quit their games, not support them anymore, not be active about it. And for many people, that's a career, right? For many people, talking about World of Warcraft is a career, or at least involving MMOs is a career. And that's a huge step for someone to make. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Because it's really important to engage. I keep saying that, but it really is. It's important to engage in this. I know it's not something fun or it's not fun to just not talk about how Activision bad, Blizzard better back in 2007, but it's really important to engage with this. It's also important to talk about why this has been happening specifically in the West. A lot of people are like, well, Final Fantasy 14 doesn't have this, right? Like I already saw those comments, right? And we don't know. We really don't know because the environments in the East, for example, are equally restrictive. If you read about some of the work conditions within the workforce in Japan, I think you are going to get a very surprising set of information if you think that the working conditions in Japan are significantly better than they are in the West. You look no further than the poor animators slaving away, creating anime in the East and literally dying on their job from overexhaustion or exhaustion, and getting paid less than what the minimum wage is, less than they deserve, less than they can live off of, even in Japan, even in the smallest sections in the city. or the cheapest sections in the city. So it's important to engage with that as well. Engage. That's the word of the day. Engage. Do it. Thanks for watching.